Today I'm joined by Sophie Davidson and we are talking about the key components of a vinyasa class. So Sophie is one of our teachers at all three studios. She mainly teaches at the Mornington studio and does moonlight appearances at both Brighton and Mordialloc. She also is one of our teacher mentors at the studios, and what that means is she goes to classes every single week across the three studios and provides teacher feedback for our current teaching team. So Warrior One, we're really big on growth. We really love supporting our teachers and ensuring that we're always kind of leveling up. So we love that role so much for you. Mm-hmm. So welcome, Soph.
Thanks, Nobes.
So how long have you been teaching at Warrior One? And tell us a little bit about your background in teacher trainings.
Sure. So coming up at about 3 years now with Warrior, which has been so wonderful. And then in terms of my background as a yoga teacher, there's been a fair few trainings. Got my 350 advanced yoga teacher training. And then on top of that, a bunch of different long and short immersive workshops and trainings in pranayama, meditation, yin, functional anatomy, you name it. I've done it.
You just finished your training now, right, too?
I did. Something I feel really passionately about is training and constantly learning, because things shift and change all the time. And I think it's really wonderful to always be kind of up to scratch with what's happening out in the yogaverse so that we can deliver really wonderful classes for the community.
Yeah, I love that. And how would you describe your teaching style?
So I like to come to the space with a really well-rounded and balanced class. So making sure that there are elements of challenge, strength, stretch, and also fun. That's really important as well. Something that I'm really passionate about is the breath. So if you come to my class, you'll almost always be served with a pranayama or a kriya of some kind. Yeah.
Served. You'll be served with some pranayama. Sounds delicious. Yeah. So as I mentioned, today we're talking about key components of a vinyasa class that we feel really create structure and framework. So this episode is primarily designed for yoga teachers or yoga teacher trainees. If you're a practitioner of yoga and you're interested in the ins and outs, this might be a really interesting listen for you as well. So when we hire teachers at Warrior One Yoga, we really are looking for these special elements within the class. And while we have 45 teachers, 140 classes a week between three studios, every teacher does come from a different lineage. So they have different backgrounds in movement or modalities, yoga, you name it. We have osteos, we have physios, we have myos, we have handstand specialists, breathwork people, we have it all. And at the end of the day, what we're really looking for is these key elements, but we love the uniqueness within each class. So if you were to go to the 140 classes that we offer, firstly, well done. But if you were to go to all 140, you'll notice that no class is ever the same. They're all quite varied, and that's actually by design. But within this, there is a framework, which we're going to get into. So I'll first kind of kick off by saying, what does the word vinyasa mean to you, Soph?
So, big question. The word vinyasa, we know, means to place in a special way with breath. That's what it means. But if we're looking at a studio and a community, and the studio has vinyasa on the schedule, typically, the students are going to be expecting a class that has more dynamism, has more pace, likely a few more challenges thrown in there, and a focus on breath as well.
Yeah. For me, I have noticed that, as we get more busy with our life, people's 1 hour yoga class is often their movement for the day. They might go on a walk or potentially go to the gym as well, but more often than not, it's just really that 1 hour a day that's your movement practice. So for me, I found, just talking to the community and our members, is that 1 hour needs to kind of encompass a lot, right? The expectation is that it's a workout. I'm using little quotation marks if you're not watching this on video. And it also is a work in. So there's an element of both strength, stretch, balance, mindfulness. There's a lot that's expected within a 60-minute class. So let's kind of talk about those elements and what we feel are vital. Number one. It's got to be the breath. I mean, even the word vinyasa, to place in a special way with breath. The breath is really important. It is really what separates yoga from
all other movement modalities. And especially when there's pace in a vinyasa, it becomes even more important because students are going to be moving and they're not going to be thinking about the fact that they need to breathe. So cueing the breath and focusing on the breath as part of your delivery of vinyasa is of the utmost importance. Number one for sure.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Number two, would have to be cueing. Super important. I think we can all agree.
Yes.
Really the foundation for the whole class. And in terms of cueing well in a vinyasa class, there really needs to be a structure around it. And at Warrior One, the teaching is the 3 A's. And this is really excellent, especially if you're currently doing your teacher training as well and you're learning this is a skill, because it is a skill. And the 3 A's are the first one, announce the breath and the pose. Second A, align the bodies in the shape. And then the third A is add. And you can add more alignment. You could add an energetic cue. You could add another breath cue, a softening cue. It can be anything. The add is the least important of the 3 in the beginning.
Correct. I think if you're new to teaching, you'll know that it is very, very difficult to do everything in a yoga room.
It's so hard.
Remember the sequence that you're going to teach, first of all. Adjust the lighting, the sound. Make sure you're looking after the pregnant person in the corner. Make sure the person that has an injury and can't bend on their knees, are okay. And then on top of that, remember all your cues. So do you want to give us an example of the triple A's? Because it is really one of those elements that really does help structure when you're just learning this, or potentially you've been teaching for a while and you just want to have a little bit more structure.
So let's say your students are in all fours, they're in tabletop, and you're taking them into downward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Tuck your toes, lift your sitting bones up and back, press the mat away with your hands. Spin the triceps back towards your thighs, soften your knees, lengthen the spine. And then if we're adding, soften the face. Lift the navel up. Feel the mat, feel the earth underneath your palms. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So what about filler words?
So this structure of cueing really helps with that, right? Because your brain is already focused. There's some kind of consistency. So there's less space for you to be mumbly and jumbly, which is, again, it's really hard. So it takes time. And vinyasa, of course, there's pace. It's faster. There's more dynamism. So there really isn't time to fluff around. And if you nail this, chances are you're going to flow seamlessly through your poses and your sequence, and there's going to be less filler words.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing we really recommend when we do our trials or our mentor sessions is to film yourself, because sometimes you don't hear what you're saying unless you watch it back. So as confronting as that may be at times, we do recommend just grabbing your phone, filming yourself, even if it's for 15 minutes, and you'll hear the filler words. You'll hear some of the things that you say that you cut out, and therefore you can leave a little bit more white space, pauses for the class.
Yeah, and that's just it. If you've got this cueing structure nailed and you start to develop these skills and you've got less filler words, you're actually going to have more capacity to be present with the space, present with the students, and then what you say becomes intentional. How many times, and I'm guilty of this for sure, I'm looking at the wall cueing a pose and I'm saying, beautiful, well done, but I'm not looking at anyone. And, we want to get better at not doing that.
It's really common. It's a common thing.
Yeah.
In regards to this, that, and those, should we talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So this is another Warrior One tip, and something that we give to all teachers that come through for trials and new teachers, and also the standing teachers classes we go to. Because again, this is just a conditioning that is really automatic, and it takes a lot of effort to reprogram. And so what we're referring to is when you're guiding students into a shape and you're referring to a body part, let's say 3-legged down dog, it's your leg, not that leg or the leg. And this really actually changes the dynamic between teacher and student. You're more connected, there's a relationship, and there just is a sort of a feeling of support. Yeah.
So replacing that or the or those. So people say that foot, those hands with your hands or your foot. It feels so much nicer. And if you have 3 people in class or 23 people in class, your students will feel like you're talking to them personally, which is a really nice connection point, like you mentioned. The other thing I'll mention on cueing, because it's one of my pet peeves, is making sure that you're not saying take your flow or take your vinyasa. Really teaching these poses, which are arguably some of the most complicated transitions, right? From high plank, chaturanga, up dog, down dog, or whatever your vinyasa looks like in your flow. But making sure that you're cueing every element of that so there isn't any, impingements, there isn't any room for error. And also for the person that's maybe newer to yoga, has no idea what that means, take your flow or take your vinyasa.
Take your vinyasa.
And then they know, okay, this is what they mean, high plank, low plank, up dog, down dog. And you're really cueing them and supporting them through that practice.
Yeah. This structure of cueing will give you the ability to be present, to create a safe environment for your students and a seamless class.
Agree.
I mean,
it's all you want.
Yeah.
So number 3,
sequencing. There's lots of different ways to sequence a vinyasa class. You can sequence to a peak pose. You can be sequencing off of your theme. You can sequence a ladder flow. There's plethora of different options. But something that's important to consider no matter how you're sequencing is something called elevator cueing. Again, another big thing that we talk about at Warrior One and it gets taught in the teacher training. Elevator cueing is kind of a technique, I guess, where when you're cueing a shape, start at the most accessible option. So most of the bodies in the room can get there and then slowly build up the shape to offer, I guess, variations or advancements, even though there's better words to use than that in a yoga class.
Yes, it's like thinking about you're literally in an elevator and you start at ground. You take the students to level 1. If you'd like to get off here, this is your level. If you'd like to come up on the elevator and come to level 2, you'll get off on this level. Or level 3 being the most, advanced, again, using my little earmarks, or the most, elevated option that you can give in that particular frame. So you're really making sure your support, not starting from the top and regressing, always starting from the bottom.
So a good example of this is the humble tree pose. So when we cue tree pose, often the first cue that will be given is to place the sole of the foot up on the inner thigh. And for a lot of bodies, that's not accessible for many reasons, and also just might not be happening today. Balance is a fickle friend, I always say. Some days good, some days not so good. But instead of starting up at the inner thigh, start at the ankle. Place the sole of your right foot on your left ankle, find your balance. Maybe then it comes up onto the calf, and maybe then it comes up onto the inner thigh. And then maybe there's a half lotus in there. If you look out into the space and you see, oh yeah, people are strong and steady and balanced, we can add.
Yeah, I love that. The humble tree pose.
The humble brick shasana.
Number 5 is
theme. Yeah, so this is a really beautiful one. And this one, in the beginning when you're starting out teaching, this might not be something that you focus on heavily. But it's a really beautiful way to elevate the class. Once you get used to having in themes, you kind of realize that without the theme in there, maybe missing out on an opportunity to offer the students a really special experience or maybe inspire them, which if you choose a theme, there's pretty much always going to be one person in the room that is really touched by that and will come up after class and say, thank you, I really needed to hear that today. And the theme doesn't just have to be a piece of philosophy, let's say. The theme might be an energetic focus. Or maybe there's a quote that you read that really inspired you and you want to create a theme around that, like a quote about gratitude or forgiveness or compassion. It takes a class from being really good to really special.
I agree. And I think it's another layer that just makes a class feel a little bit more considered, a little bit more intentional. And, like you said, theming can look so different. It could also be your playlist. You could really bring a motive through music, and I think that's a really beautiful to theme. So lastly, I think we should talk about pace.
Yes. So as mentioned earlier, vinyasa, place in a special way with breath, that's what it means. But the community, when they book into a vinyasa class on a schedule from a yoga studio, are expecting a pace with more dynamism, more flow, and probably some challenges. So the pace is important. You know, there might be slow flows on the same day and then vinyasa. So there needs to be some kind of difference between those two. And it doesn't mean that it needs to be fast. It doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't also mean that there needs to be like a whole class of 1 breath per movement, but it just has to be faster than a slow flow.
Yes, I think, you know, as we talked about, there is an element of people wanting to experience a slow flow for a slow flow and a vinyasa for a vinyasa. So I think that's important to make sure that it is dynamic and it has challenge in there, and it's just a little bit more pacey than a fundamentals or a slow flow class.
Yeah, and that you kind of hit the nail on it then, because vinyasa and slow flow, they are different experiences. Vinyasa, there is an opportunity to really hone in on the breath, because that is how you're moving from pose to pose rather than staying and holding for X amount of breaths. And also what can happen in vinyasa, which is really beautiful, is there's less time to be thinking because there's more time moving and grooving and doing the yoga. So that can be kind of like a tonic for a lot of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tonic. Love that word. So in regards to the 5, we had breath, cueing, sequencing, theming, and pace as our elements. We hope that you felt that you got a little bit of tidbits out of that. Is there anything that you wanted to close on, Soph?
When considering all of these parameters that we've discussed today, teach what lights you up. Teach what you love. If you're really into breath work, teach pranayama. If you love philosophy and that is your jam, then spend more time on your theme, you know? This structure doesn't mean that you have to be a carbon copy of one another in the studio. It actually will allow you to be more authentic, because you'll have more space to focus on the good stuff, on the present stuff.
It's so true. And, you know, in our teacher training, we really talk about that. We give you guys the recipe. We say that on our teacher training. We're going to give you the best ingredients, organic, delicious ingredients. And it's up to you to put those ingredients together to make the recipe and bring you. Teach what lights you up. There's no really better way to finish than that. Thank you so much for your wisdom today, So.
No problem, Nova.